Hi everyone, I'm Emma.
I'm Jack.
Welcome to our channel. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are going to talk about something that seems simple, but actually affects almost every part of our lives: conversation.
That is a great topic because talking is something everyone does. But having a truly meaningful conversation is a much more difficult skill.
Exactly. Most people learn how to speak when they are children, but very few people are taught how to communicate well.
And that difference can have a huge impact. The quality of our conversations can influence our relationships, our careers, and even the way people see us.
When you think about it, almost every important relationship in life is built through communication.
Yes, friendships, family relationships, professional connections, and romantic relationships all depend on how people exchange thoughts and feelings.
But interestingly, many problems between people are not caused by a lack of care.
They are often caused by misunderstandings.
Exactly. I think one reason communication is difficult is that people often focus on expressing themselves, but they do not spend enough time understanding others.
That is a very common problem. Many conversations are not really conversations. They are just two people waiting for their turn to speak. Someone says something, and while the other person is listening, they are already preparing their own response.
So they are hearing the words, but they are not fully listening.
Exactly.
There is a big difference between hearing and listening.
Yes, hearing is simply receiving sound. Listening requires attention, curiosity, and effort.
Can you think of a situation where people hear each other, but do not really listen?
A very common example is during disagreements. Imagine someone says, "I feel like you don't spend enough time with me."
Many people immediately become defensive.
Right? They might respond, "That's not true. I am busy because I have work."
But they are already defending themselves instead of understanding the feeling behind the words.
Exactly.
The person may not actually be asking for an explanation.
They may simply want to feel understood.
That is a very important distinction. So sometimes the real message is hidden underneath the words.
Yes, human communication has many layers.
The words themselves are only one part.
Exactly. Tone, emotions, timing, and body language also communicate information.
For example, someone might say, "I'm fine."
But depending on their voice and expression, the meaning could be completely different.
They could genuinely be fine.
Or they could be disappointed, tired, or upset.
So understanding people requires paying attention beyond the literal words.
Exactly.
This makes communication sound almost like a skill that needs practice.
It absolutely is.
But many people assume good communication is just a natural personality trait.
Yes, some people believe that confident speakers are automatically good communicators.
But speaking confidently and communicating effectively are not always the same thing.
Exactly.
Someone can talk a lot, but still fail to connect with others.
And someone who speaks less can sometimes create much deeper conversations.
That brings us to another important part of communication: asking questions.
Yes, good questions can completely change a conversation.
Because they show interest.
They show that you are trying to understand another person.
But not all questions create meaningful conversations.
Right, some questions only collect information.
While better questions encourage people to share ideas and experiences. For example, instead of asking someone, "Did you have a good day?"
You might ask, "What was the most interesting part of your day?"
The second question invites a story.
Exactly.
It gives the person something meaningful to talk about.
And stories create connection.
I think this is something people often forget. Conversations are not only about exchanging information.
They are also about building understanding.
A conversation can make someone feel respected.
It can make someone feel valued.
It can even change the way people see themselves.
Exactly.
Have you ever had a conversation that changed your perspective on something?
Definitely. Sometimes one meaningful conversation can introduce an idea that stays with you for years.
What makes those conversations different?
Usually, it is not just the information. It is the feeling that the other person was genuinely interested and present.
So the connection matters as much as the content.
Exactly.
That leads to another interesting question. Why do some conversations feel natural while others feel uncomfortable?
A lot of it comes down to psychological safety.
Psychological safety.
Yes, it means feeling comfortable enough to express your thoughts without worrying too much about judgment or rejection.
So people communicate better when they feel safe.
Exactly.
That explains why people often open up more with certain friends or family members.
Right.
Creating that kind of environment seems like an important communication skill,
It is.
because people are more likely to share honestly when they feel respected.
Exactly.
And honesty creates deeper relationships.
Yes.
I think this topic is especially important today because people communicate more than ever through technology.
Yes, we send messages all day, but that does not always mean we are having meaningful conversations.
Sometimes we have hundreds of interactions, but very few real connections.
That is a very modern challenge.
So maybe learning how to have better conversations is more important than ever.
I completely agree.
One thing that makes conversations complicated is that people often think communication is about delivering a message clearly. Of course, expressing yourself is important, but communication is not only about sending information from one person to another. It is also about creating a shared understanding between two people.
That is a really important difference. Many conflicts happen because people believe they have explained themselves clearly, but they forget that the other person may interpret the message differently. Communication is not complete when we finish speaking. It is complete when the other person understands what we truly mean.
This explains why two people can have the same conversation, but remember completely different things afterward. One person may remember the words that were said, while the other person remembers the emotion behind those words.
Exactly. In many situations, people are not reacting only to the sentence itself. They are reacting to what they believe the sentence means. A simple comment can feel supportive to one person but critical to another because their experiences and expectations are different.
A good example is feedback at work. Imagine a manager tells an employee, "You need to improve this report before the next meeting." Some people may hear that as useful guidance. They may think, "My manager wants me to become better." But another person might hear it as criticism and think, "My work is not good enough."
The interesting thing is that the words are exactly the same, but the emotional reaction is completely different. This is why good communicators pay attention not only to what they say, but also to how the message may be received.
So effective communication requires a certain amount of empathy.
Yes, empathy means trying to understand another person's perspective before immediately judging or responding. It does not mean you always agree with someone. It means you make an effort to understand why they see things differently.
That seems to be one of the hardest parts of communication, because humans naturally see the world from their own perspective.
Right, our own experiences feel normal to us, so we sometimes forget that other people may have completely different backgrounds, values, and ways of thinking.
This becomes especially important when people have disagreements. Many arguments become worse because both sides are trying to prove they are right instead of trying to understand the problem.
Yes, in a disagreement, people often move into a defensive mode. Once they feel attacked, their main goal changes from solving the issue to protecting themselves.
And at that point, even a reasonable idea can be rejected because of the way it is delivered.
Exactly. The emotional state of a conversation can completely change the outcome. Two people can discuss the same topic calmly and reach an understanding, or they can discuss it with anger and damage their relationship.
So sometimes the problem is not the topic itself. It is the way people approach the topic.
That is often true.
I remember reading about how successful conversations often begin with curiosity rather than judgment. Instead of thinking, "How can I prove this person wrong?" people can ask, "What experience led this person to think this way?"
That change in mindset can completely transform a conversation. When someone feels that you are genuinely curious about their perspective, they are usually more willing to explain themselves.
And once people feel heard, they often become more open to hearing another viewpoint.
Exactly. Feeling understood creates space for mutual understanding.
This is why listening is not a passive activity.
Right, real listening requires energy. You need to focus, ask follow-up questions, and sometimes even repeat what you heard to make sure you understood correctly.
There is a communication technique called active listening that many professionals use, especially in counseling, leadership, and conflict resolution.
Yes, active listening is about showing the other person that you are truly paying attention. It can involve simple things like maintaining eye contact, asking meaningful questions, and summarizing what someone has said.
For example, instead of immediately responding with your own opinion, you might say, "So what I understand is that you feel frustrated because you were not included in the decision. Is that correct?"
Exactly. That kind of response shows that you are trying to understand before giving your own perspective.
And surprisingly, many people do not need someone to solve their problem immediately. They first need someone to recognize how they feel.
That is a very human need.
Another interesting part of communication is silence. Many people feel uncomfortable when there is a pause in a conversation, so they quickly try to fill the space with more words.
Yes, but silence can actually be valuable. It gives people time to think, process emotions, and choose their words carefully.
A short pause can sometimes create a deeper conversation than a quick response.
Exactly. People often believe good communicators always have something to say, but sometimes knowing when not to speak is just as important.
That requires confidence, because silence can feel uncomfortable.
It does, but comfortable silence is often a sign of trust between people.
This is interesting, because many communication skills are actually connected to patience.
Absolutely. Good conversations cannot always be rushed. Sometimes people need time to organize their thoughts or find the right words.
Especially when discussing personal topics.
Yes, when conversations involve emotions, relationships, or important decisions, people need space to express themselves honestly.
So being a good communicator is not about controlling the conversation.
It is about creating a space where both people can participate.
I think that is a good place to end this part. A great conversation is not created by one person speaking perfectly. It is created when two people are willing to understand each other.
Exactly, communication is not a performance, it is a connection.
One of the biggest changes in communication today is that people are talking more than ever, but that does not necessarily mean they are communicating better. Technology has created more ways to connect, but having more conversations does not always lead to deeper understanding.
That is a fascinating contradiction of modern life. We can send a message to someone on the other side of the world in seconds, but sometimes we struggle to have a meaningful conversation with the person sitting next to us.
Exactly. The tools for communication have become more advanced, but the human skills behind communication still require practice.
A lot of digital communication is also missing important parts of traditional conversation. When we speak face-to-face, we can observe tone, facial expressions, pauses, and body language. Online messages often remove many of those signals.
And without those signals, people sometimes misunderstand each other more easily.
Yes, a short message that seems completely normal to one person may feel cold or unfriendly to another person.
This is one reason why written communication can sometimes create unnecessary conflicts. Someone sends a message with a simple intention, but the receiver interprets it in a completely different way.
Right. The problem is that our brains naturally fill in missing information. When we do not know someone's tone or emotion, we often create our own explanation.
And that explanation may not be accurate.
Exactly. If someone replies with a very short message, one person may think they must be busy. Another person may think they are angry with me.
The same message creates two completely different experiences.
That is why important conversations are often better handled through voice or face-to-face communication.
Because richer communication channels provide more information.
Exactly.
Another challenge of modern communication is that people often communicate while being distracted.
Yes, this has become a very common problem. Someone may be physically present in a conversation, but mentally somewhere else.
For example, checking a phone while someone is sharing a story,
That small action can send a powerful message.
even if the person does not intend to be rude.
Right, the other person may feel that their words are not important.
This shows that attention itself is a form of respect.
That is a great way to describe it.
I think many people underestimate how meaningful attention can be. Sometimes the most valuable thing you can give another person is simply your full presence.
Absolutely. In a world where everyone is competing for attention, giving someone your complete focus has become surprisingly rare.
And because it is rare, people notice it.
They do.
A person who listens carefully often makes others feel comfortable opening up.
That is because people naturally trust those who make them feel seen and understood.
Let's talk about another common communication problem. People often try to respond too quickly.
Yes, there is a difference between reacting and responding.
That difference is very important.
A reaction is usually immediate and emotional. A response involves more thought and awareness.
For example, during an argument, someone might hear a sentence they dislike and immediately say something defensive.
But if they pause for a moment, they may realize the other person's intention was not to attack them.
So a small pause can completely change the direction of a conversation.
Exactly.
This idea is especially useful in difficult conversations. Many people avoid difficult conversations because they are afraid of conflict.
Yes, but avoiding every uncomfortable conversation can create bigger problems over time.
Because the issue does not disappear.
Exactly. It often becomes stronger because people keep their feelings inside.
So having difficult conversations is actually an important relationship skill.
Absolutely.
But having a difficult conversation does not mean starting with criticism.
Right. The way we begin a conversation often determines how the other person responds.
For example, saying, "You never listen to me," immediately creates defensiveness.
Yes, the other person may focus on defending themselves instead of understanding the problem.
A different approach might be saying, "I feel unheard when I try to explain something," and the conversation changes quickly.
Exactly. That focuses on your experience rather than attacking the other person's character.
This connects to the idea of using language carefully. Small changes in words can create very different emotional reactions.
Yes, language is not just a way to transfer information. It also affects how people feel.
A sentence can create connection or create distance.
It can encourage cooperation or create resistance.
So communication is partly about choosing words that open a conversation instead of closing it.
Exactly.
Another important communication skill is knowing when to ask questions instead of giving advice.
That is something many people struggle with because when someone shares a problem, our first instinct is often to solve it.
We want to help.
Yes, but sometimes people are not looking for a solution immediately. They want to feel understood first.
So the best response may not be, "Here is what you should do."
It may simply be, "That sounds really difficult. How did that make you feel?"
That question creates space for a deeper conversation.
Exactly.
I think this is one reason good conversations can feel almost healing. They give people a place where they can express thoughts they usually keep inside.
Yes, a meaningful conversation can help people organize their thoughts, understand their emotions, and sometimes see a situation differently.
So conversation is not only about connecting with others.
It can also help us understand ourselves.
After discussing modern communication, it seems that the biggest challenge is not having fewer opportunities to talk.
It is learning how to make those conversations meaningful.
Because connection requires more than sending messages.
It requires attention, empathy, curiosity, and patience.
Those qualities may seem simple, but they are becoming more valuable in today's world.
That is true. Whether you are meeting a new person, working with a team, building a friendship, or maintaining a family relationship, your ability to communicate shapes the quality of those experiences. The good news is that communication is a skill, which means it can be improved through awareness and practice.
One mistake people often make is thinking that good communicators are simply naturally charismatic people. They imagine that some people are born with the ability to connect with others, while others are not.
But many excellent communicators are not successful because they are naturally outgoing. They are successful because they understand people. They know how to listen, how to create trust, and how to make others feel comfortable.
So communication is less about personality and more about behavior.
Exactly. A quiet person can be an excellent communicator if they know how to engage with others in a meaningful way.
One behavior that seems especially important is curiosity. When people are genuinely curious about others, conversations often become much deeper.
Yes, curiosity changes the way we approach people. Instead of thinking, what can I say to impress this person? We start thinking, what can I learn from this person?
That is a very different mindset.
It is. When the goal is connection rather than performance, people usually become more relaxed.
And the conversation feels more natural.
Exactly.
This is why some people can talk with a stranger for an hour and make it feel easy.
Because they are interested, not just interesting.
That is a great distinction. Another important skill is remembering that every person has a story we cannot see.
Absolutely. This idea can completely change the way we interact with people.
Someone may appear quiet, but perhaps they are simply shy or unfamiliar with the situation.
Someone may seem unfriendly, but perhaps they are having a difficult day.
Someone may have a different opinion, but that opinion may come from experiences we have never had.
Exactly. When we remember that everyone has a complex background, we become less likely to judge people too quickly.
And conversations become more respectful. This becomes especially important when communicating across cultures.
Yes, as the world becomes more connected, people increasingly communicate with those who have different cultural backgrounds.
But cultural differences can sometimes create misunderstandings.
Definitely. The same behavior can have different meanings in different cultures.
For example, in some cultures, direct communication is considered honest and efficient.
While in other cultures, people may prefer a softer and more indirect style because they want to protect harmony.
Neither approach is automatically better.
Exactly. They simply reflect different values and communication styles.
I think this is where cultural awareness becomes important. Good communication is not about expecting everyone to communicate exactly like us.
Right. It is about learning how different people express themselves.
A person who understands cultural differences can avoid many unnecessary misunderstandings.
Yes, they become more flexible.
And flexibility is one of the most important communication skills.
Absolutely.
Let's return to personal relationships. Many people want stronger relationships, but they sometimes focus only on spending more time together.
Time is important, but the quality of interaction matters too.
Two people can spend many hours together, but still feel disconnected.
Exactly.
While another two people can have a short but meaningful conversation and feel much closer afterward.
That is because connection comes from understanding, not simply physical presence.
This makes me think about friendships. Some friendships remain strong even when people do not talk every day.
Yes, often those friendships are built on trust and the feeling that both people genuinely understand each other.
When they reconnect, the conversation feels natural.
Exactly.
Because the relationship is not based only on constant communication.
It is based on emotional connection.
Another important part of communication in relationships is appreciation. People often notice problems more easily than positive things.
That is true. Human attention naturally focuses on what needs improvement.
But expressing appreciation can strengthen relationships.
Absolutely.
A simple sentence like, "I appreciate what you did," or "I enjoyed talking with you," can have a bigger impact than people realize.
Because people want to feel valued.
And communication is one of the main ways we express that value. Something else I find interesting is that good communication does not mean avoiding all disagreement.
Exactly. Healthy relationships are not relationships without conflict. They are relationships where people know how to handle conflict respectfully.
That is an important difference.
Two people can disagree and still respect each other.
The goal is not to eliminate different opinions.
The goal is to understand each other even when opinions are different.
So perhaps one of the biggest signs of strong communication is the ability to stay connected during differences.
I agree. Anyone can have a good conversation when everyone agrees. The real test is what happens when people see things differently.
That requires patience,
It requires humility too.
because sometimes we need to accept that we may not have the complete picture.
Exactly.
After everything we have discussed, I feel that great conversations are not created by perfect words.
I agree. They are created by the attitude behind those words.
A willingness to listen,
A willingness to understand,
a willingness to be open.
and a willingness to see another person as a human being, not just an opinion.
One thing that makes certain conversations unforgettable is that they allow people to show a more honest version of themselves. Many everyday conversations stay on the surface. We talk about the weather, work, schedules, or simple events, but sometimes a deeper conversation can completely change how we understand another person.
That is true. Surface-level conversations are not necessarily bad. They are an important part of social life. They help people create comfort and familiarity. But deeper conversations create another level of connection because they allow people to share their thoughts, experiences, and emotions.
I think many people want deeper conversations, but they do not always know how to create them.
Yes, one reason is that deeper conversations require a certain level of openness. People have to be willing to share something real, and that can feel risky.
Because when we reveal our thoughts or feelings, we become more vulnerable.
Exactly. And vulnerability can feel uncomfortable because it means allowing someone else to see parts of ourselves that are not always perfect.
The word vulnerability is interesting because many people associate it with weakness.
Yes, but psychologically, vulnerability is often connected to courage. It takes confidence to be honest about your experiences, especially when you do not know how another person will respond.
So saying, I am struggling or I made a mistake can actually require strength.
Absolutely.
This explains why people often feel closer to those who are willing to be genuine.
Exactly. When someone shares something honestly, it often gives others permission to do the same.
It creates a feeling of trust.
Yes,
However, being open does not mean sharing everything with everyone.
that is an important point. Good communication also requires understanding boundaries.
Because trust develops over time.
Exactly. A meaningful relationship is usually built through many small moments of respect and understanding.
Not through one single conversation.
Right.
So communication is a process.
Yes, every interaction adds something to the relationship.
I think this idea explains why small conversations can sometimes have a big impact.
Absolutely. A short conversation at the right moment can change how someone feels about themselves or a situation.
For example, a teacher encouraging a student at the right time.
A friend offering support during a difficult period.
A colleague recognizing someone's effort.
Exactly.
The words may seem simple.
But the timing and sincerity make them powerful.
This makes me think about how important encouragement is. Many people remember specific words someone said to them years ago.
Yes, human memory is strongly connected to emotions. We often remember not only what people said, but how those words made us feel.
A single positive comment can stay with someone for a long time.
And unfortunately, negative words can also have a lasting effect.
Which means we should be more thoughtful about the way we communicate.
Exactly.
Another important part of communication is knowing how to express disagreement without damaging a relationship.
Yes, this is a skill many people struggle with because disagreement often feels personal.
When someone disagrees with our idea, we sometimes feel like they are rejecting us.
But an opinion is not the same as identity.
That distinction is very important.
Two people can have different opinions and still respect each other.
In fact, thoughtful disagreement can sometimes create better understanding.
Exactly. Different perspectives can help us see things we might have missed.
I think the problem begins when people stop discussing ideas and start attacking people.
Yes, once a conversation becomes about proving someone is wrong as a person, meaningful communication becomes almost impossible.
because the other person naturally becomes defensive.
Exactly.
A healthier approach is focusing on the idea itself.
Right? Instead of saying, "You are wrong," we can say, "I see this differently because."
That small change creates a completely different atmosphere.
Yes, it keeps the door open for discussion.
This also connects with emotional control. Good communication requires managing our reactions.
Absolutely.
If we respond immediately when we are angry, we may say things we do not truly mean.
Yes, strong emotions can reduce our ability to think clearly.
So sometimes the best communication skill is simply waiting.
Exactly. Taking time before responding can protect relationships.
There is something powerful about people who can remain calm during difficult conversations.
Yes, they create stability when emotions are high.
They do not ignore the problem.
No,
They simply approach the problem with more awareness.
exactly.
That kind of communication builds trust because people feel safe expressing themselves. When we look at all these examples, it seems that great conversations are not really about having impressive things to say.
I agree.
They are about creating an environment where people feel respected and understood.
Exactly.
A person does not need perfect vocabulary or perfect answers to have meaningful conversations.
They need attention, curiosity, and sincerity.
That is also why communication is such an important skill for English learners. Learning a language is not only about grammar and vocabulary.
Yes, language is a tool for connection.
Knowing thousands of words is useful.
But knowing how to listen, ask questions, and express ideas naturally is what creates real communication.
A language becomes meaningful when it helps us understand another person.
Exactly.
So perhaps the goal of learning communication is not just to become a better speaker.
It is to become a better human connection builder.
I really like that idea.
Because every conversation is an opportunity to learn something about another person and about ourselves.
After exploring so many different aspects of conversation, I think we can see that communication is much more than simply exchanging words. A conversation is a meeting between two perspectives, two experiences, and two different ways of seeing the world.
Exactly. Every person carries a unique story. Their childhood, experiences, beliefs, successes, and challenges all influence how they communicate. When we truly listen to someone, we are not just hearing information. We are getting a glimpse into another person's world.
That is probably why meaningful conversations can feel so powerful. They remind us that everyone has a story that we may never completely know.
Yes, and this understanding can create more patience and kindness in our interactions. When we remember that people are complex, we become less likely to judge them based on one moment or one sentence.
A person who seems difficult today may simply be dealing with something we cannot see.
Exactly.
I think one of the biggest lessons from today's conversation is that good communication begins with intention. Before speaking, we can ask ourselves, what is my goal in this conversation?
That question is incredibly useful. Sometimes our goal is to solve a problem. Sometimes it is to understand someone. Sometimes it is simply to make another person feel supported.
And different goals require different communication styles.
Right? If someone is sharing a personal problem, giving immediate advice may not be helpful. They may need empathy first.
If we are having a disagreement, proving ourselves right may not be the best goal.
Exactly. Protecting the relationship and finding understanding may be more valuable.
Another thing I have learned is that communication is not about winning.
I completely agree.
In many conversations, people treat discussions like competitions.
Yes, they focus on who has the better argument, who can respond faster, or who can prove the other person wrong.
But a meaningful conversation is not a competition.
It is a collaboration.
Both people are working together to create understanding.
Exactly.
This idea is especially important when we learn a new language. Many language learners are afraid of speaking because they worry about making mistakes.
Yes, they often think every sentence must be perfect before they say it.
But real communication does not work that way.
Exactly. Native speakers make mistakes too. The purpose of language is connection, not perfection.
A learner who is willing to communicate, ask questions, and continue despite mistakes will usually improve faster.
Because every conversation becomes a learning opportunity.
I think many English learners focus heavily on vocabulary lists and grammar rules, which are important, but sometimes they forget the human side of language.
That is a very important point. Language exists because humans want to share ideas, emotions, and experiences.
Learning expressions like, "How was your day?" or "What do you think about that?" is not only about memorizing sentences.
It is about creating opportunities for real interaction.
The goal is not just knowing English.
The goal is using English to connect with people.
Another valuable skill is learning to be comfortable with imperfect conversations.
Yes, many people avoid conversations because they are waiting for the perfect moment or the perfect words.
But real conversations are often messy.
Exactly. People pause, correct themselves, change topics, and sometimes misunderstand each other.
That is normal.
What matters is the willingness to continue and understand.
This reminds me of something important. Relationships are not built through one amazing conversation.
Right, they are built through many small conversations over time.
A quick message checking on someone.
A short conversation during a busy day.
A moment of listening when someone needs support.
All of these moments contribute to a relationship.
So communication is not only a skill we use, it is something that shapes our lives.
Absolutely.
The conversations we have influence the people we become.
They influence what we learn, what we believe, and how connected we feel to others.
That gives every conversation more importance.
Yes, even a simple conversation can have an impact.
Before we finish today's episode, let's summarize some of the biggest ideas.
First, good communication is not only about speaking clearly, it is about understanding others.
Second, listening is just as important as expressing yourself.
Third, meaningful conversations require curiosity, empathy, and patience.
Fourth, disagreement does not have to destroy relationships. It can create deeper understanding when handled respectfully.
And finally, communication is about connection, not perfection.
I really like that final idea, especially for anyone learning a language or trying to become a better communicator.
Yes, do not wait until you are perfect before you start connecting with people.
Every conversation helps you learn.
Every conversation helps you grow.
Every conversation gives you a chance to understand someone new.
And perhaps understand yourself a little better too.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode.
We hope this conversation encourages you to pay more attention to the conversations you have every day.
The next time you talk with someone, try listening a little more deeply.
Ask a little more curiosity-driven questions.
And remember that behind every voice is a unique story.
See you next time.
See you.